So I have to make a bit of a confession before we start. I thought, given how the last basing paint or base painting video went, I thought maybe I'd do a little practice before I started recording. And so I watched a few videos on how to do this. So the idea is I want to get these guys painted. If you remember back to a previous video, I unboxed these resin bases. They're 32 millimeter, meant for my Space Marine Deathwatch chapter, and they come in that really pretty blue translucent color or material. So I give them a prime. I used this guy, Citadel Color Gracier. And it's supposed to be a primer. That's how everyone seems to use it, but I'm having some trouble. I don't know if I'm doing something wrong. Anyway, so I thought I'm going to give this some practice. And so my initial thought was I'm going to go just give it a wash over the primer and then just kind of do some dry brushing, and that should be that. But I was watching some people do some really nice looking bases. And I thought, well, let me give it a shot. And so I did, right? So I started off with something like this. And I'm going to zoom in. So I started off, the idea was that you paint the bricks in the base individually. And you pick kind of related colors. Now, I'm horrible with picking colors and color theory, or sometimes just using my eyeballs in general. So I picked a couple of different paints, and so I wanted a brown, right? So the brown is what they used in the video. They weren't using Army War Painter paints. They used a different brand, and so I just kind of winged it. I picked oak brown, and the way that one person did it is they produced kind of a glaze, or even maybe a glaze. So they watered down the paint to a glaze consistency and then just painted a couple of the bricks. And then they kind of had a closely related color. It was like a different brown, and then they made a glaze out of that, and then they went on the other bricks. And then on the third set of bricks, they combined those two colors and created kind of a neutral third color, and then finished off the rest of the bricks. After that, they did some other stuff, which I kind of zoomed through because it was pretty late at night. So that's what I did here. So it was just a combination of oak brown, and I wanted something red, like almost like a rusty kind of a color. So I picked this guy. Probably not the best color to use, but I had it, and I hadn't used it before. Give it a shot, right? So I made two glazes, and then the third glaze I made a combination of these guys, and they're all, you can kind of see them all on my wet palette. So here's the red, here's the brown, here's a couple of glazes, and I ended up mixing them up. Long story short, here's what it looks like. So let me zoom in. So here's what it looks like. There's the red ones, there's the brown ones, and I think I even went over the brown ones with that combination glaze because I wasn't liking the way they looked. And so I did two bases just like this, and then I was like, you know what, I just don't like, because they kind of look like that, and I just didn't like the way they looked. So I thought, you know what, let me do stuff the way I'm used to doing it, which is just to kind of put down a wash, and then I was going to go over and kind of highlight the other bricks. So this one is the result of, there we go. Well, let me do this. Alright, so I have here 3 different versions of these bases. This version is it just has a primer on it, that Citadel Corax White. This is the version that I tried to use the different colors to try to kind of give each brick its own individual color. And so that's the way that turned out. And so when I was looking at it, I kind of didn't like what I saw. It looked a little odd. And you know, I was having some trouble getting the paint onto the primed surface of the base. It kind of wasn't working out, and I thought, you know what, all right, so maybe this isn't the way. Maybe this is the way. Excuse me. And so what I did here was I just took this primed base and I made a wash. I think it was a kind of a... Oh, no, it wasn't brown. It was this stuff. Dark stone. It's kind of like a dark gray. So I made a wash or a glaze out of it, and I kind of applied it all over the brick. And I thought, well, okay, that's fine. Maybe that's the way to go. It's not really what I wanted, but, you know, I can get behind this. Especially if maybe I'll do another layer of the glaze over it, and then I'll go with some dry brush, and it'll kind of pick up some of the hints, it'll do what dry brushing always does, is it gives it a bit of a surface. And so I was kind of happier with this than I was with this. And so I thought, well, okay, well, I'll see what it looks like when I go over the painted version, like I have another base that I did this to, and then I put the wash over that, and this is what happened. Move this up. And so what you'll notice is that, I mean, it looks a lot like this, but even here you can kind of see the color behind the wash. And I liked what I saw. I mean, there was different colored bricks, but it didn't look like that. It looked much better than this. So, one of the people that I saw, it wasn't a very big channel. I did a search on painting brick bases, and one of the things he said was, trust the process. And when I did this, and I decided to not do it, I did not trust the process. So now that I see this as my preferred method. You can still see the color of the individual brick, but they're muted and it kind of blends in a little better. So that's what I'm going to do. I didn't notice it until I had done the same thing to this guy. And so this is a little darker than that one, but I think I'm going to try for this effect. And the idea here is I'm going to use these bases for the kill team, the Deathwatch Kill Team that I got in the start collecting box. So now that I've seen this up close, I'm going to try to go for this. And so I'll give you a close-up of this so you can kind of see more of the detail, see how it does look a little bit more like brick. It's a little bit of extra work, right? Because we have to paint each brick individually, and you have to pick from the different colors. Kind of a pain in the butt, especially since I'm having that adherence problem. But I like the way this looks. So I'm going to try the rest of the bases that are primed. I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to do the individual colors and then go over them with a wash. Then I have to find a way of salvaging these two. So I want these two to eventually look like this one, or at least as close to that as possible. So I'm going to do this to all 10 bases, and then I'll have to try to salvage these. And of course, then you also notice this base has this gunk on it. It's not actual gunk. It turns out it's part of the design. I can't confirm that, but I think it's part of the design. I haven't gone back to look at the Etsy store where I bought this. But I suspect what the artist who created this is trying to convey is that the bases like this one have, they're different. Kind of like this one right here. You'll see how there's bricks, but there's also this kind of gunk. And I realize I think what this is representing is like encroachment of dirt or sand or snow. So I bought some flocking, and so I'm going to apply some glue to these. So once they're painted, I'll apply some glue to these, and I'll add either sand or gravel or some other kind of stuff to, kind of dress this piece up. So that's the plan. Anyone want to come with me on this journey? Let's see what it looks like. Okay, I wanted a bit of a close-up on this because I want to show you the trouble I'm having with the adherence of the paint. So I'm going to go over this brick right here. And I'll let it rest for a little bit, absorb some of the excess glaze. Now it's really light, but you'll see how it's kind of pooling. It isn't really adhering to the primer. I kind of have to go back and add a little bit more, and so I have to be very deliberate with my brush strokes and everything. I don't know if I'm doing something wrong here or if there's something wrong with either my paints or how I'm creating the glazes or whatever. I noticed it in my earlier build with the Hellblasters, but I was pretty sure it was just me. But I'm less convinced of that now. So we'll let those do their thing for a sec. So, see how it's pooling as opposed to kind of just sticking to the surface of the primer. I'm not sure what is happening there, but before it dries completely, I have to kind of go and touch it again. And so maybe that's normal. It doesn't feel normal, but what do I know? I am not an expert at this by any measure. It just doesn't feel like it's doing the job that I expect it to do. All right, we'll go back to this one. See how it kind of pulled right in the middle? It's almost like it's being repelled from the primer, which is kind of the opposite of what I want a primer to do. So I don't know what the deal is. I have started I primed my Watch Captain. It's Watch Captain Artemis, I believe, for a different video. I used a different primer. I used Army Painter Black. And so kind of show you. So it's a pretty dark black. But I haven't done any painting on these yet. I haven't done any painting on these yet, so I don't know how the paints are going to react. Like if I'll continue to have this problem, or if by using a different primer, that problem will go away. But that certainly will be on my mind as I do this. Actually, I'll go back here and hit it with my brown wash, or my brown glaze. Yeah, it really doesn't want to stick to the glaze, to the primer. Yeah, it feels like it almost feels like I'm dry brushing, like the paint that I'm using or the glaze that I'm using is only adhering to the surface level. It isn't seeping down in the cracks. It's like the opposite of what I expect a wash or a glaze to do. And I don't know why that is. And since knowing is half the battle, I've won exactly none of the battle. See what I mean? That's not just me, right? It should not be doing this. Like, it's still, eventually, as I keep working at it, it ends up looking better. I kind of have to wait for it to dry a bit and then give it another pass. And you already see differences between this one and this one. Like, there's a bigger pooling effect on that one, but I did kind of go over that one a second time. But I've gone over this one a second time too. Maybe I need a third time. I don't know. It does eventually settle, but it's not doing what I want. If anyone sees this video and knows what I'm doing wrong, please let me know. I'd appreciate it. Okay, this is what it looks like when the bricks are all painted. And they look a little weird, but I am confident that when we apply the wash, everything will look better. So, just kind of want to show you what they look like. So this is a relatively simple one. It's all just bricks for the most part. And so you'll see there's brown ones, there's red ones. I've tried to include a couple that were a little bit of both, a little brownish red. I don't know how well they show up, but maybe they will. And so there's a lot of variation on how well the paint adhered to them. And right now, they look gross, right? They look... yeah, I would chuck these away. But I am pretty sure I am pretty sure that once we start to add a wash of this stuff over it, it'll look quite a bit better. Before I let it before I start doing the wash, I need to let these guys dry. So this is the result of my efforts at painting and then washing the resin bases that look like they had brick. Off camera, I also did some of the flocking of those areas that had that gunk on them. So they look all right. A little browner than I was expecting, but it probably works. And so I'll do a little close up here. and gives us a sense for what they look like. A lot of that color didn't come through the way I was thinking. You can kind of still see that there's variation across the bricks, but the variation just kind of looks like it's some of them are dark, some of them are light. It might be a result of I kind of applied wash pretty liberally, and so the wash I think maybe muted the difference in colors. Some of these bases are a little different. You can see more red on those, and so that inconsistency is a matter of just the it's just a matter of how the paint went on to the primed areas. And so I have, this is one of those with flocking. So I've covered up those areas with what looks like gravel. I'm not entirely happy with the way they look. Just gonna clean up some of the flocking. I think maybe the gravel that I used is a little coarse. But, you know, it's my first attempt at adding flocking. It's not the worst. I did have to do a couple of coats, and I didn't film that. I don't know if that was particularly interesting, or if maybe I will pay closer attention to that in future videos. But you'll notice that that one has just a couple of rocks sticking out of it. So the last thing that's needed for these bases, well, there's three things that I need to do. So the next step, I think, is to go over these with with a dry brush. I'm not quite sure what color to pick up here. Maybe something a little warmer, like a very light brown, like a tan. That might do the job. And I think that's the way I'm going to go. I'm not quite sure how to get tan in here, but I'll figure that out. After that, I need to go in and paint the sides of the bases. And I could go with a brown, or I can go with a black. Since my other bases are outlined in black, I think I'll probably end up doing that. Just go with a flat black. And after that, I'm going to seal them with a little bit of the munitorium varnish, and hopefully that'll kind of protect the paint, and it'll protect the flocking as well. All right, let's get to that. All right, I've chosen desert yellow for the dry brush. I don't know how well that's going to work, but I'm going to give it a shot. And I don't want to use the wet palette for this. Do I? No, I don't. Well, I don't have a dry palette, but I do have dry palettes. I'm going to try that. I've never done this before, but I didn't like the way using just the paper that goes on the wet palettes. I didn't like the way that felt. I don't know if I mixed this well enough. All right. Gesundheit. That was my pooch Raleigh doing a little sneezing thing. All right, I'm gonna work some of this yellow into the bristles. Dry it off. Now cross my fingers and hope I don't actually ruin this thing. Huh. That doesn't look half bad. So it's kind of picking up those edges, making the bricks look a little bit more brick-like. And yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that. I'm not gonna try to get too cute and potentially ruin them. These will do the job. Yeah, that is fine. Just for the sake of comparison, we have these two bases. This one is dry brushed, this one is not. And yeah, I can tell there's a bit more texture on this one than this one. It's a very subtle difference, and that's going to work. It kind of just gives the bricks kind of a, if they're kind of broken or malformed, it gives them, kind of highlights them, kind of reinforces the how worn they are. So yeah, I like this. This is going to work well. Dab, dab, dab. Dry, dry, dry. Yeah, and I didn't dry this enough. There's a lot more tan on this one. It's okay. I could use some variation. That's fine. Ooh, it should be interesting. This is one of those bases where the red really came through. Yeah, that's fine. That'll work. Yeah, and here I'm kind of emphasizing, so the corner of this base has some of that crud. I think it's like encroaching gravel or sand or whatever that is. And so I'm being a little more liberal with this one, just so it can kind of, it looks like it just has a touch of that encroachment. That'll work. So I'm going to keep going with these that are unflocked. Now these, I'm tempted to do just a little differently since they've already got a significant amount of this gravel on there. I think I'm going to try a slightly wetter dry brush just to get more of the yellow on the bricks, just to kind of represent that that these are, you know, almost covered up. It's a little tougher because I don't want to dislodge that flocking, and perhaps I should have added the flocking after the dry brush. Yeah. Yeah, that'll work. It is slightly more yellow than the one without flocking. That's kind of what I was going for. It's not exactly what I want. It's a little hard to dry brush that transition area. So maybe if I change the angle of the dry brushing. It's good enough. It's not going to be perfect. Oh, there's some more not perfect. I didn't dry this. All right. I'll just double down and really get in there. Let me try to get rid of some of that. I made it worse. Getting your dry brushed area wet turns it into a wash or a glaze. But you know what? That's fun. There's a lot of flocking on this one. Let's just pretend that was intentional. So here's another observation. Using this method where where I put the paint onto a plate, it worked just as well as putting it onto a piece of parchment paper that goes into this wet palette. And it worked just as well in that it didn't work well at all. You see how dry this is already? It's just been a few minutes and it's really, really dry. In fact, this is the dot that I didn't use. And so I'll just kind of, well, okay. Yeah, it's just a little, yeah. So maybe next time I'm going to try dry brushing. I'll put that thing on the wet palette and entrust the paper towel to do the drying that I need. I don't know that that's going to work, but I do want to experiment a little bit with this. Most of my knowledge of how to do this comes from people who have successful channels on YouTube and teaching people how to do things because they're good at that. They're experienced, they have skills that others don't have. And so they pick up those skills by practicing and by trying things. And so I'm going to do some of the same. So this plate attempt didn't work satisfactorily, but maybe it's not bad. Like maybe I can just use the parchment paper. This is the way it's supposed to work. And I'll try it by next time I do the bases. I think the next bases are, oh yeah, the next bases are those. Oh. So the next bases are these. These are the last of the resin bases that I ordered. These are those industrial looking bases. And I'm going to see how they work. And so when I do these, I'll try dry brushing off of the wet palette. I suspect it's not going to work. It's going to leave very wet dry brushing. But I just really don't like the way this one felt. And so if using the wet palette for dry brushing is even worse than this, then what I'll do is I'll just add, you know, the source paint to the parchment paper like I did the first time. And that might just be the best way to go, unless I see something else on YouTube that inspires me to try a different technique. I'm going to need to wash this. All right, the last step is to paint the edges of this thing, and I should just stick with brown. Yeah, I think it's going to be less visually jarring than going black on the edges. So, where is my oak brown? Or I could do dark stone. Yeah, I'm going to try this dark stone. Yeah, that's not bad. That looks finished. This is just the first pass. I'm going to go over each of these at least twice to make sure that that coat is nice and even. But I think this color selection will work. I am okay with it.